He was wrong about all three things. Wrong about the watch being worthless. Wrong about me not understanding Mandarin. And most importantly, wrong about thinking I'd forgotten what respect means. My son-in-law, Marcus, had no idea that his smirk across the Christmas dinner table had just set something in motion he wasn't prepared for. Let me back up. My name is Robert Chen, though most people in our Vancouver neighborhood just call me Bob. I'm 63 years old, and, for the past 20 years, I've made my living as a building superintendent. You know the type. I fix leaky faucets, unclog drains, handle tenant complaints. It's honest work. Work that keeps my hands busy and pays the bills since my wife Diane passed away 8 years ago. My daughter Sarah is my whole world. Always has been. She's a nurse at Vancouver General Hospital, works the emergency department. Strong, compassionate, exactly like her mother. 3 years ago she married Marcus Liu, a corporate lawyer with one of those downtown firms that occupies the top 10 floors of a glass tower. I'll be honest, I had reservations from the start. Not because Marcus wasn't successful, not because he came from money, but because of the way he looked at people like me, service workers, blue-collar folks. That particular combination of pity and dismissal that people mistake for politeness. But Sarah loved him. That's what mattered. The watch incident happened on Christmas Eve, 2023. Sarah and Marcus were hosting dinner at their Cole Harbor condo, the kind of place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, where the monthly maintenance fees probably equaled my mortgage. I'd brought a gift for Marcus, something I'd been holding on to for nearly 40 years. The dinner party was small. Sarah and Marcus. Marcus's parents, Richard and Patricia, who owned a chain of luxury car dealerships. His younger sister, Amanda, a dentist, and Amanda's fiancé, David, something in tech, I could never keep track. The condo was decorated like something from a magazine. Everything white and silver and crystal. Even the Christmas tree looked expensive, like each ornament had been individually curated. I felt out of place the moment I walked in wearing my good sweater, the one Diane had bought me years ago. Marcus greeted me with that professional handshake he'd perfected, the kind that's firm enough to seem sincere but doesn't actually convey any warmth. "Bob, great to see you. Here, let me take your coat." Sarah hugged me properly, the way daughters do. "Dad, I'm so glad you're here. Come on, everyone's in the living room." Richard was holding court near the fireplace, telling some story about a Tesla buyer who'd tried to negotiate the price. Patricia stood beside him, laughing at the appropriate moments, holding a glass of white wine that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Bob," Richard's voice boomed, "the man who keeps Vancouver running. How's the superintendent business?" There it was, that tone, jovial on the surface, but with that underlying current that made superintendent sound like a punchline. "Steady," I replied. "Always something breaking somewhere." "I bet!" He clapped me on the shoulder. "Thank God for people like you. Society needs folks willing to do the jobs nobody else wants." I felt Sarah tense beside me. She knew. She always knew. Dinner was elaborate. Marcus had hired a catering company. Some kind of fusion cuisine that looked beautiful but left me wondering where the actual meal was. The conversations flowed around me: tech stocks, real estate markets, vacation properties in Whistler. I nodded along, contributed when I could, but mostly I just watched Sarah. Watched how she navigated between two worlds, how tired she looked. After dessert, some deconstructed cheesecake thing, Sarah suggested we exchange gifts. That's when I pulled out the small, wrapped box I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket. "Marcus," I said, handing it to him. "This is for you. It's not much, but I thought you might appreciate it." Sarah's eyes lit up. She knew what it was. I'd told her about it years ago. Marcus took the box with that polite smile people use when they're already preparing to fake enthusiasm. The room went quiet as everyone watched him unwrap it. Inside was a watch. Not just any watch, a 1960 seconds Omega Seamaster DeVille. Gold-plated case, cream dial, leather strap I'd recently had replaced. It had belonged to my father, who'd received it as a retirement gift after 30 years working as a dock supervisor at the Port of Vancouver. My father had given it to me on my wedding day. "Your turn to build something that lasts," he'd said. I'd worn it every day for 20 years, until Diane died. After that, I couldn't look at it without breaking, so I'd put it away. But recently, watching Sarah try so hard to bridge the gap between her world and Marcus's, I thought maybe it was time for the watch to mean something new. A way of welcoming Marcus into our family properly. A symbol that said, "You're one of us now." Marcus held the watch up to the light, turning it over in his fingers. The room was silent. Then he said something in Mandarin. Quick, under his breath, but clear enough. 真是便宜的垃圾。这老头以为这能给我留下深刻印象吗？ Cheap garbage. The old man thinks this will impress me. His mother, Patricia, let out a small laugh. She'd understood. So had his father, Richard, who smirked into his wine glass. They thought I didn't speak Mandarin. Why would I? The Chinese superintendent who anglicized his surname to Chen, who spoke English with that particular Vancouver cadence. They'd made their assumptions. They were wrong. My father was from Guangdong, my mother from Shanghai. I grew up bilingual, though I'll admit my Mandarin got rusty over the years. But you don't forget your mother tongue. Not really. I sat there, watching Marcus set the watch down on the coffee table, like it was something he'd need to dispose of later, watching Sarah's face fall as she registered his lack of enthusiasm, watching Richard and Patricia exchange that knowing look that said, "See? We told you his family was beneath us." Amanda, bless her, tried to salvage the moment. That's actually really thoughtful, Bob. Vintage watches are having a moment right now. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. It's fine, very sentimental. He said the word like it was a diagnosis. The question was, how long was I going to let this continue? I could have said something right then. Could have responded in perfect Mandarin, let him know I'd understood every word. Could have made it ugly and immediate. But I looked at Sarah, at the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she was holding herself together for this dinner party. This wasn't the moment, not for her sake. So I smiled. I nodded. I accepted Marcus's cold thanks. And I started planning. Over the next 3 years I watched. I waited. I learned everything I could about Marcus Liu. I learned that he collected watches. Expensive ones, Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet. He had a whole display case in their bedroom, Sarah had mentioned once. Status symbols that he wore to court, to client dinners, to prove something to someone. I learned that he spoke Mandarin primarily with his parents, usually when they wanted to discuss something they didn't want others to understand. Sarah had mentioned feeling left out sometimes, how they'd switch languages mid-conversation at family dinners. I learned that despite his law degree and his corner office, Marcus knew absolutely nothing about vintage timepieces beyond their current market value. And I learned that my father's watch, the cheap garbage, was actually worth considerably more than Marcus's entire collection combined. You see, I'd had it appraised years ago, right after Diane died. Just curious about insurance, you understand. The appraiser had gotten very quiet when he examined it, had made some phone calls, had asked if he could take photographs. Turned out my father's retirement watch wasn't just any Omega Seamaster DeVille. It was a rare transitional model from 1963, one of only a few hundred made before they changed the design. The reference number, the original dial condition, the fact that it still had the original box and papers that my father had carefully preserved all of it meant something to collectors. The appraiser's estimate? Somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 Canadian dollars, depending on the buyer. I'd nearly fallen over. But I hadn't sold it. Couldn't. It was my father's legacy. My connection to him, to Diane, to the life we'd built together. The money didn't matter. Until Marcus called it garbage. Then it mattered very much. I didn't tell Sarah what I'd heard at that Christmas dinner. Didn't want to poison her marriage with my hurt feelings. She was happy, or at least she was trying to be. Who was I to interfere? But I started attending estate sales, started learning about watches properly, made friends with collectors, auction house specialists, horologists. I wanted to understand this world that Marcus pretended to inhabit. Turns out, collecting watches is like any other pursuit. There are people who do it for love, and people who do it for show. Marcus was definitely the latter. He could quote prices and brands, but he couldn't tell you about movements or complications or the history that made certain pieces special. He was exactly the kind of collector that serious horologists quietly mocked. 3 years passed. Sarah stayed busy with work. Marcus stayed busy with his career, his collections, his world that had no real room for me in it. I stayed busy with my buildings, my tenants, and my new hobby of actually understanding the thing Marcus had dismissed. Then, in October 2024, Sarah called me. "Dad, Marcus and I are hosting a dinner party. His firm just made him junior partner, and we're celebrating. Can you come, please? I know these things aren't really your scene, but it would mean a lot." How could I say no? The dinner was set for early November. Sarah mentioned that Marcus had invited several senior partners from his firm, their spouses, plus his family. Big celebration. That's when I decided. 3 years was long enough. Time for a little education. I spent 2 weeks making arrangements, called in some favors, made some expensive decisions, but by the night of the party, everything was in place. The dinner party was even more elaborate than the Christmas gathering 3 years prior. The condo was full, maybe 20 people, all dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as Vancouver business formal. The men in suits that cost more than my monthly rent, the women in designer dresses and jewelry that caught the light. I arrived on time, dressed in my one good suit. Sarah hugged me at the door, whispering, "Thank you for coming, Dad." Marcus was already holding court in the living room, drink in hand, laughing with a silver-haired man I recognized from the news, Thomas Brennan, managing partner at Marcus's firm. "Bob!" Marcus's voice carried across the room. "Everyone, this is my father-in-law, Bob Chen. He keeps the city running literally. He's a building superintendent." There was polite laughter. That particular kind that's not really about humor, but about acknowledging someone's place in the social hierarchy. I shook hands, made small talk, let the evening flow around me. Dinner was catered again, even more elaborate this time. 6 courses, each announced like it was a work of art. Wine pairings that Marcus explained with the kind of detail that suggested he'd memorized a sommelier's script. During the main course, some kind of duck preparation, Marcus started talking about his watch collection, showing off the new Patek Philippe on his wrist to Thomas Brennan. 19,000, he was saying. Annual calendar, moon phase. You can't find these easily. Beautiful piece, Thomas agreed. I've got a similar model myself. That's when Marcus's father, Richard, chimed in. Marcus has quite the eye for quality. Been collecting since law school. I cut into my duck, said nothing. Bob, Patricia's voice carried down the table. Do you still have that old watch you gave Marcus a few years ago? The sentimental one? The table went quiet. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus actually laughed. Oh, that thing. Yeah, it's around somewhere. Sweet gesture, though. I set down my fork, looked up, met Marcus's eyes. Actually, I said quietly, I was wondering if you still had it. Something in my tone made the table go silent. Marcus's smile flickered. Sure, I think so. Why? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, set it on the table next to my plate. Because, I said, still in English, I had it authenticated, professionally. Would you mind bringing it out? I think everyone here might find it interesting. Marcus's face went through several expressions. Confusion, annoyance, then something that might have been concern. Bob, he said carefully, I don't think this is really the time. Laban, I said, switching to Mandarin, watching his face go pale. I think this is exactly the time. Don't you? The Mandarin word Laoban, which can mean boss or person in charge, hung in the air. His parents had gone rigid in their seats. Sarah was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Dad, you speak Mandarin? 你的丈夫不知道很多事情, I said to her in Mandarin, then switched back to English. Your husband doesn't know many things. For instance, he doesn't know that I understood him perfectly 3 years ago when he called my father's watch cheap garbage at Christmas dinner. Patricia dropped her wine glass. It shattered against her plate. Marcus had gone white. Bob, Please, I said politely, bring out the watch. I think Mr. Brennan here might appreciate seeing it. He collects vintage Omegas, don't you, sir? Thomas Brennan was leaning forward now, interested. I do, actually. What model are we talking about? A 1963 Seamaster DeVille, I said. Transitional model. Original dial, original papers. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. If that's authentic, I know what it's worth, I said softly. That's why I brought documentation. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Marcus, who looked like he might be sick. I'll get it, Sarah said, suddenly standing. Her voice was shaking. I know where it is. She disappeared into the bedroom. The silence stretched. Marcus stared at his plate. His parents looked at each other with barely concealed panic. Sarah returned, holding a small wooden box, the original Omega box my father had kept. She set it in front of me. I opened it slowly. The watch gleamed under the dining room lights, exactly as I remembered it. I'd maintained it carefully over the years, kept it serviced. It still ran perfectly. May I? Thomas reached out, and I nodded. He picked up the watch with careful hands, turning it over, examining the case back, the dial, the crown. His expression shifted from interest to astonishment. Good God, he whispered. This is genuine. The reference number, this is a 2,904-3. The transitional model before they went to the 2,920 case. He looked up at me. Mr. Chen, do you have the papers? I handed him the envelope. Inside was the original warranty card, the receipt from 1,963, and the modern appraisal from Sotheby's that I'd commissioned 2 weeks ago. Thomas read the appraisal, blinked. Read it again. Marcus, he said quietly, did you know this watch is worth approximately $185,000? You could have heard a pin drop. Amanda was staring at her brother. David had his phone out, clearly looking up the reference number to verify. Richard and Patricia looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Sarah was looking at me with tears in her eyes. Marcus had his head in his hands. San Yin Sen, I said softly in Mandarin, then switched to English. 3 years ago, I gave you this watch as a gift. A family heirloom. My father wore it for 30 years. I wore it for 20 more. It represented 50 years of honest work, 50 years of building something that lasts. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. You called it garbage, in Mandarin, because you thought I wouldn't understand, because you assumed that someone who fixes toilets for a living couldn't possibly know anything valuable, couldn't possibly speak your language, couldn't possibly be worth your respect. Marcus's face was buried in his hands now. His shoulders were shaking. You were wrong, I continued, about the watch, about me, about what makes something or someone valuable. The room was frozen. Sarah had tears running down her face. But here's the thing, I said, and my voice gentled. I'm not here to humiliate you, Marcus. I'm here to teach you something my father taught me. I reached over and carefully took the watch from Thomas's hands, held it up so everyone could see it. This watch isn't valuable because of what it's worth in dollars. It's valuable because of what it represents. The years, the work, the hands that wore it, the moments it witnessed. My father's retirement, my wedding, the birth of my daughter, 50 years of a life well lived. I looked directly at Marcus, who finally raised his head to meet my eyes. That's what you dismissed. Not cheap garbage. A legacy. The silence was absolute. Then I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I set the watch down in front of Marcus. I'm giving it to you, I said. Again, for real this time. Sarah made a small sound. Marcus looked stunned. But, I continued, on one condition. Anything, Marcus whispered. You learn what it means, not the price, the meaning. You learn about your heritage, the language your parents speak, the culture you use as a weapon instead of a gift. You learn about the work that built this family. And you learn that respect isn't about what someone does for a living. It's about recognizing the dignity in all honest work. I pulled out a business card from my pocket, handed it to him. This is a friend of mine, Thomas Wu. He's a horologist here in Vancouver, and he teaches courses on watch collecting, history, and restoration. I've already paid for a year of lessons for you. Every Saturday morning, you'll learn about movements, complications, brand histories, but more importantly, you'll learn patience, attention to detail, respect for craftsmanship. Marcus was crying now, full-on crying in front of his colleagues, his family, everyone. I'm also, I continued, going to teach you Mandarin properly. Not the Mandarin you use to talk around people, Real Mandarin. We'll meet every Sunday. I'll teach you what my parents taught me. The idioms, the culture, the history. You want to connect to your heritage? Let's connect. Sarah was beside me now, her hand on my shoulder, tears streaming down her face. And finally I said, "You're going to spend one Saturday a month working with me, in the buildings, fixing toilets, unclogging drains, painting walls, meeting the people who live there, immigrants, students, families, seniors. You're going to learn what I learned, that every person has value, every job has dignity, and that the measure of a man isn't what he owns, it's what he does with what he's been given." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping back. For a moment I thought he might leave, might storm out. Instead, he came around the table and stood in front of me. Then he bowed. A proper Chinese bow, from the waist, the kind you give an elder you've disrespected. "对不起," he said in Mandarin. "I'm sorry. 我错了,我完全错了." I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I stood and helped him straighten up, put my hands on his shoulders. 我们都会犯错, I said. We all make mistakes. 重要的是我们如何纠正它们. What matters is how we correct them. He nodded, unable to speak. The dinner party dissolved after that. People drifted into quiet conversations. Thomas Brennan came over and shook my hand, told me he'd love to hear more about my father's career at the port. Amanda apologized for her family's rudeness. Even Richard and Patricia approached, shamefaced, and offered halting apologies in English. Later, after everyone had left, it was just Sarah, Marcus, and me standing in the kitchen while Sarah made tea. "Why?" Marcus asked quietly. "Why give me the watch after I treated you so badly?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because that's what family does," I said finally. "We correct each other. We teach each other. We give each other chances to be better." I looked at the watch on the counter between us. And because that watch means nothing sitting in a box, it means something when it's worn by someone who understands what it represents. Someone who's earned the right to carry that legacy forward. I picked it up and fastened it around Marcus's wrist. "Earn it," I said simply. He nodded, staring down at the watch on his wrist like it was the most precious thing he'd ever held. That was a year ago. Marcus has been taking the lessons religiously, both from Thomas Wu and from me. His Mandarin has improved dramatically. We spend Sundays going through Chinese literature, discussing idioms, talking about my parents' journey from China to Canada. And yes, he comes with me every fourth Saturday to work in the buildings. He's actually pretty good at basic repairs now. The tenants love him, especially Mrs. Kowalski in 4B, who still can't believe that the fancy lawyer comes to fix her leaky sink. Sarah told me that Marcus wears the watch every day now, not to court, not to impress clients, just wears it. Sometimes she catches him looking at it, touching it, the way you touch something that matters. Last month, for my 64th birthday, Marcus and Sarah gave me a gift. It was a photo album, a new one, with photos of my father, my mother, my wedding to Diane. Photos of Sarah growing up, and at the end, new photos. Marcus and Sarah's wedding, family dinners, the two of them in work clothes helping me paint an apartment. Marcus with Mrs. Kowalski. Marcus at his watch lessons, focused and serious. The last photo was of Marcus wearing the watch, standing next to my father's photo from his retirement dinner. The same watch, 2 generations apart. Tranchen. Marcus had written in careful Chinese characters below the photo. Legacy. I cried. I'm not ashamed to admit it. The watch is where it belongs now, with someone who understands that its value isn't in what it costs, but in what it carries. The weight of the years, the dignity of work, the love of family. My father would have approved. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't the fastest one. Sometimes you wait, you watch, you teach. And sometimes you take something that was dismissed as garbage and turn it into a bridge between generations, between worlds, between who we are and who we're capable of becoming. Marcus still has a long way to go. We all do. But he's learning, he's trying. He shows up every Saturday and Sunday, ready to work, ready to learn. And that's all any of us can really do. The watch keeps perfect time. just like my father knew it would. 51 years now, and counting. Still running, still marking the moments, still witnessing the building of something that lasts. That's what makes it valuable. That's what makes anything valuable. Not the price tag. The legacy.